What is up, ladies and gentlemen? This is Purple Soy 22 and Style Pigeon coming at you live from Walkabout Minigolf, where we are taking a Sunday to golf, chat about Bitcoin and its relevancy to time. And I'm stoked to be here, man. How's it going, Pigeon?
Dude, I'm stoked too. And I'm so glad we get to do it in a cool place like this. Since we're talking about time, we decided that we're going to actually play through a cool journey through time, ancient time, so to speak, as we play through a course that's based on the book Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne.
Super stoked. This is going to be great.
Okay, cool.
Before we get kicked off, though, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors, Roundly X. They are a super simple to use dollar cost averaging app where you can round up your everyday purchases into Bitcoin or other crypto assets as you like. If you're outside of the United States, they have a really cool feature called Idea Bumps that you can subscribe to, where you can kind of know what other people are dollar cost averaging into and then make your decisions based off of that information. Super cool product. If you use the title of our show, Gingerly, to sign up, you get $15 in Bitcoin after your first roundup or your first idea bump. So go check them out, roundlyx.com. Use that code Gingerly because you love your gingers. And
yeah, we do.
Let's get started. So I'm going to take my first putt before I take a look at the outline here.
Okay, cool. All right, strategy.
Yeah. So we're gonna. Am I going to do this? No, I'm not. I'm going to go this other way.
I was wondering.
Okay. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that.
By the way, everybody, we do actually.
Almost.
That was close. We do actually play this for the Bitcoin Badgers as well, and I live stream that every Wednesday. So if y'all want to hear us just cut up and have a good time, very unprofessional. That one,
very unprofessional.
Yeah, we cut up a lot. So
Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, come join us.
Yeah.
And hey, if you're into VR, that could be awesome to have you come play as well. That'd be really cool.
No. Oh no, I'm stuck behind the thing.
Okay, the topic. So if I think today's actually a really good day. I'm kind of glad that we delayed this because the topic of why time matters so much for Bitcoin is really relevant, especially given all of the geopolitical crap that's been happening in the last 48 hours. If you keep track of that, there's been this big, explosion in the Middle East, like figuratively and literally, Israel and Hamas going at it. And I don't care what side you take, but the fact of the matter is that war is being propped up by fiat currency, basically. We can dive into that more. But the big reason that I wanted to talk about this is because of the time element that is required to give Bitcoin value. And I think it sounds kind of bizarre if you first talk about it. Like, what does time have to do with money?
Yeah. So I tried to run it by my mom today, and she didn't understand it. So I was like, okay, cool.
So that's good to know. Yeah. Well, so I just want to think about it from a really, like, even before we start thinking about Bitcoin, like, I just want to think about money. And traditionally, if you think about money, there actually was more of a time value associated with it, like before modern times. So if you go way back, like, but basically barter, right, was how a lot of people transacted, right? So like, I'm going to give you I'll give you a cow and I want in exchange, like I need some wheat or some corn or whatever. And you just have to work that crap out. And there's like, the value of time is you put in the time and effort to raise whatever it was that you're going to barter, right, for the other thing. And you have to try and estimate, okay, based off of the amount of time it took me to raise this cow, how many items make sense, right, to exchange. Like, so the farmer that raised the eggs or whatever, or the wheat, like, how do you figure out the value?
So there's also an element of like energy or effort required as well, right? That's kind of almost synonymous with time in this scenario. Okay, cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Make sure I'm understanding you right.
That's kind of where I'm thinking. And so, like, as time went on, it became more and more obvious, like, we're not going to be able to just do barter forever. Like, that doesn't scale, right? What if, like, I want to buy a house, right, but I can't pay in cows? That doesn't make much sense.
Sure.
So how do we make up the difference in value to be able to purchase really large items, for instance? And so they're like, okay, well, let's move to things that are easy to transact in. We've transacted in shells. We've transacted in shiny rocks like gold. you know? And what's interesting is that there's still a pretty major time requirement, even to shells. But gold is really easy to think about because a lot of Americans remember or have been told about the gold standard, right?
Right, right. So it's a matter of scarcity, right, which Bitcoin has, as well as time and energy put in to pull that or find that and then pull it out of the ground would be what makes gold valuable.
Right. So, and that used to require, or used to, it still does require a whole lot of actual human work hours. But not just that, like the time and energy required to produce the materials to even get the gold out of the ground, right? So
Right.
if you think about it for half a second, there's a very obvious component of like time contributing value to the thing that we're transacting in if you think about gold, right? So so if you still think about gold, I don't want to even transition to Bitcoin yet. Think about the fact that we went off of the gold standard, and I can't remember if it was 71 or 73. I always get the two confused. But
I think it's 71, but
yeah, I
I
think
might be
that's
wrong
right.
too.
So we went off of the gold standard, and like basically what that did is it took our money and it removed time from being a factor, right?
Right.
So in the
Right.
70s, things were starting to become digital, but even then, like making more money required actually like printing of more money, right? So in
Yeah,
a sense,
physical minting.
there was actually still a time element if you think about it, because we had to go to the presses, we had to use raw materials, and like people said, okay, well, the money is only worth like the paper that it's printed on, which if you think about that, I there is some value, I guess, to that. But these days, if you take it a step
Yeah.
further, we've even removed time more, because now all that we do, if we want to inflate the monetary supply, which we do quite often, we just change a 0 to a 1 in a digital ledger, right?
Yep.
And so now there's virtually no time. Like, oh, that's not hard enough. Oh, maybe it is.
Oh, that's pretty good actually. Don't fall
Oh,
off.
okay.
Squeal.
Wow. So anyway, nowadays there's virtually no time element at all
That's not hard enough at all. Wow,
to the
what am
money
I
that we
doing?
use.
I'm thinking about time. I didn't put enough time and energy into that shot,
Into
which is
that
why it
putt.
was garbage.
That's right. So like
Okay, so fiat does require some time and energy in the first place when they came up with the idea. But given the advent of the digital, that is no longer the case, which is maybe some small contributing factor to the increase in the rate of inflation, right?
right. Yeah, it's
Okay,
much,
interesting.
much, much easier to inflate. And so
Right.
like, okay, so we've taken time out of fiat currency as a value, right? So
Yeah,
so what do we fall back onto? If you ask someone like what backs the dollar, if they're really stupid, they say gold. They don't know their history, right? Next
sure.
hole.
And that
But
really
if
doesn't even have anything to do with their intelligence level, right? That's just a matter of education.
Right, sure. But if you take it a step further, people might say, "Oh, like oil backs the US dollar. Like we have all of this, oil reserves, whatever." Like
Sure.
that's not a terrible response, but like if you take it even a step further than that, what's really backing the dollar is the military,
Yeah, it's
right?
violence. I think that's actually what Nick, our producer,
And
likes to say is violence.
yeah, yeah. Well, Nick's 100% right.
Yeah,
Like
I agree with him too.
even if you say oil, like, well, how do you get that oil? And for the United States, since we have all of these policies that don't allow us to use our own natural resources, we have to use the military to secure oil in foreign soil, right?
Right.
So what's happening right now with between like the Hamas and Iran and Israel, and everyone's wondering like, or at least I'm wondering, why on earth are we even concerned about that as Americans, right? Because it's something that's been going on for hundreds of years. Well, the answer is
Thousands.
if the US oh, that was oh
Oh,
wow.
you might get lucky.
No, it
Oh, it
timed out.
timed out?
Yeah, I don't know.
Dang. Oh
If
well.
if the US is dependent on oil and the military for the dollar having any value, well then we have to be involved in all of these different global conflicts, because there's no wow. How did that not
Okay.
how did
Okay.
that not fall off?
That's
That's
an
incredible.
analog for us transitioning to fiat, like rugged.
You mean an analogy? I think you said analog.
Okay, whatever it's called. Whatever the name
um,
is. So, okay, so all of the stuff that's happening in the Middle East, or a lot of the stuff that's happening in the Middle East, is in no small part simply a battle over resources in that area.
and control over like fiat currency. So the people
Right.
like Iran and Brazil and Russia and China, they we talked about this a few shows back. They recently created the BRICS program, which is basically a coalition of countries to try and get off of dependency for the US dollar.
Yeah.
Because the United States has been making such terrible economic decisions recently,
Right.
the effect of that is carried out really heavily on other nations, right? So basically, the US makes decisions, other nations suffer first, and it's like a trickle up effect in a negative sense. And so
Yeah.
these nations are tired of being dunked on by the United States, and so they're trying to,
Yeah. I don't blame them.
I don't blame them either. So anyway, how does this all relate to time? Well, it means that since time is good shot,
Oh, thank you.
since time is no longer a part of our day-to-day currency value, we have to find more oil, and we have to have more war to be able to prop up the value of not just the dollar but any fiat currency. So the next question is, how can we get time back into currency? And I think you know what I'm going to say.
Bitcoin.
Yeah. So
So, okay,
yeah, go for it.
I'm really interested in the idea not just of time. Okay, actually, sorry. Let me let you. I'm going to let
No,
you
no, no.
cook.
I
Because
think you
I
speak.
want to
Yeah,
play
you're
with the
doing well.
idea. I want
Yeah.
to play with the idea a little bit. Because that's what I like to do. Right? Is I'm the idea guy or whatever.
Yeah.
Hey, hole in one. Whoa!
Hey, let's go.
The hole in one hole. Um, so
Oh, too hard. My goodness
one of
gracious.
the things that I think about a lot is how
Oh.
oh, that's unfortunate. How uh like what is the actual substrate of a thing, right? Like, let's see, how do I put this? I haven't packaged this idea properly yet.
This is why we're
My
doing the show, man.
go-to explanation is that narrative and story, oops, is like the substrate of what human consciousness actually is, or human psychology at least, and I think maybe consciousness as well. Um, is we have to have that like story layer. That's why
Right.
narratives play out in the media so well, is
Uh-huh.
because
Yeah,
they
yeah. I buy
provide the
that.
thing that is needed for a stable psychology in some sense.
Right.
And if you, unless they want it to not be stable, I guess, but aside from my tinfoil hat ideas about news media, that story is necessary, right? So how does time constitute the actual substrate for Bitcoin, right? Because Bitcoin is a blockchain technology. It is built on a blockchain, and that's all based on cryptography.
Right.
So where does time come in at for the people who are here to actually have this conversation gingerly?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Can
So
you
we've
can you break
talked.
that down?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically we've established that time is a very obvious value construct in what we consider necessary for currency, because at a certain rate, the scalability of, okay, how do I buy a house if we're using just barter, doesn't make sense, right? So we've established that.
Sure.
I think if we're gingerly approaching this topic, most people would say, yeah, totally. I hear you, Purple. Time should be a part of currency. And maybe, it's obvious that time is less of a thing now. You could say time is required to keep the military running, time is required to mine oil, whatever. But at the end of the day, the currency itself doesn't have like a direct relationship to time. And that's where Bitcoin steps up.
Okay.
So, in an age where digital inflation is very easy and requires little to no effort, Bitcoin comes in and says, we are going to have an inflation rate that is constant because it's based off of math. And we're going to say every 10 minutes, a set amount of Bitcoin is going to be released into the wild for use. That's a set inflation rate. It's something that we can verify. And I'm here to tell you right now that we cannot verify the inflation rate of the Fed or of the spending habits of the government. Like, we can't pull up a little query and say, like, how much is my money going to be worth today because of the Fed's inflation rate, right?
Right, right.
And another aspect is with Bitcoin. So it's not just that, like, it's not just a constant inflation rate that is bound by time and mathematics. It's also, oh, way too hard. Wow. It's also the fact that actually producing Bitcoin or like securing the network takes actual electrical commitment, right? So actual energy commitment to say, I care enough about securing the Bitcoin network that I'm going to dedicate computing power and electricity to this.
Right, right.
And individuals all over the world are doing that, not just Americans, right?
Yep. Yep.
So now we're talking about an issuance rate that's constant, that is backed. People say that Bitcoin is valueless, but at the very minimum, it's backed by the fact that all of the people that believe in it are contributing resources to keep it humming.
Oh no.
And we can't say that about the US dollar.
Right, right. So and that's one of the reasons that it is, in some sense, the price action is so volatile, right? Is because people don't understand this concept, and therefore they think it's more so driven by sentiment, right? So sentiment is what changes the uh, like dollar valuation of Bitcoin, right? But Bitcoin's still the same thing, regardless of that price action,
Right. Yeah, exactly. We like to
which is
say one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin.
right,
And it's a
right,
silly little saying, but what it
right.
means is that Bitcoin has value regardless of what the US dollar is doing. And I think before too much longer, we're going to start to see some radical Bitcoin price action that is less due to Bitcoin gaining value, air quotes, and more
Hmm.
due to the US dollar just continuing to lose its value, its purchasing power. You're going
Yeah.
to have substantially more dollars to be able to purchase Bitcoin because the dollar is
Ooh,
just losing its
which
value.
and then that will actually be time. So it takes time for that occurrence to happen, right?
Right.
So, like, oh god, this is so complicated to say in words. The time will finally catch up with the real valuation of what Bitcoin
Of the
is.
dollar
Right.
and Bitcoin. Yeah, it's working both directions
Interesting.
because the United States is getting to a point where we're at an all-time low of our oil reserves. And so we have to,
Oh,
like, to prop
yes.
up our economy, we have to make some hard decisions about what we're going to do about the reserve. Do we, like, go to war with the Middle East? Like,
Yeah, do we
they're
allow the
offering that as
military
a
industrial
solution.
complex to be what solves the problem?
Right.
That worked in
Exactly.
World War II.
Exactly. But you know what? It ain't World War II anymore. We have
Right.
literal presidential candidates like Robert Kennedy, um, coming out and being like, I want to put the dollar on a Bitcoin standard because he realizes what we're talking about,
Right.
that we're on a dying system.
Yep.
The dollar can't keep this up forever because it's literally just the power of the military. And let's be honest, the United States is not terribly powerful at the moment.
Well, and and it shouldn't be. We shouldn't have to constantly rely on violence as our means of exchange. Like, don't we all kind of want to live in a peaceful society at a certain point? Like, isn't that a priority?
Well,
Um,
that's a good question.
or not? Like,
I think it used to be a rhetorical question, but,
right.
like, it's not anymore,
Which is
which is
sad.
bizarre.
And
And,
now, to
like,
be fair, that's just a part of human nature, also.
sure, but we can't just in my opinion, I don't think we can just excuse that anymore. Like, it's 2023, y'all. How long are we going to let the government decide that we're gonna send our kids off to war to support the military and oil? And
Right.
meanwhile, like, we're sending funds to Ukraine and, like, the economy is in the worst shape it's been in our lifetime. Like, I'm gonna
Yeah.
have a kid here in a couple weeks, and I'm terrified about just being able to stay employed and pay bills.
Right.
Meanwhile, our parents were able to buy houses, send their kids to college, have 3 cars all on a single income. Like, what the fuck happened?
Yeah.
Inflation, removing time from our currency happened.
Yep.
So this isn't just something that's theoretical. I strongly believe that we've got to come to grips with this. Oh, this might be a hole in one.
All right,
Okay,
we
wait.
wait, we wait, we
We're
wait.
gonna wait. Come on,
Come on, baby,
stream.
come on, come on, come on,
Will it to
come on,
happen?
come on, come on. I need your prayers.
Go! Maybe?
Oh, dude, I did it.
Yeah!
Let's go.
Let's go!
See,
Let's
that shit doesn't
go!
happen with inflation. It only happens
That's
when you're
right.
talking about Bitcoin.
That's right.
Yep, Bitcoin's a hole in one, you might say.
And now you get to watch me struggle through this. Which side did you go on? The right side or the left side?
Let me replay it for you.
The right side. Okay, wow.
I got super lucky not going over that rib bone.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Like I
no.
said, now y'all get to sit here and watch me struggle.
So what can we do with this information? Like, how do we get from where we're at to where we're going?
Well, yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think also it's a really important time to be thinking about this kind of stuff because we are coming up on an election. So there's
Yep.
several things that come to my mind that everyone listening and everyone that's going to be voting should be thinking about. One is who among the candidates for the president are actually presenting valid solutions that aren't let's go invade the Middle East or let's go have more war. There are
Right.
not that many. Okay. So support the ones that are in favor of not sending your kids off to war to support their currency.
Sure.
And maybe that looks like researching and buying Bitcoin. You know what I mean? I think that's even more important than voting. I think putting your money out of their system and into Bitcoin that we know is valued by time. Like, I think
Yeah.
that's important. So buy Bitcoin, support presidential and political candidates that actually want to get out of the system. You know, like, why are we continuing to support people that want to continue propagating this? And then
Yeah.
third, if you paid any attention at all to the last election, like, you know that there was some stuff that was fishy. Okay. Again, it's 2023. Why are we using mail for voting? You know, why are we having to go in person to a high school to a little machine that is obsolete in terms of technology, like was built in the 70s and can easily be manipulated? We have technology to be able to make elections actually transparent and actually real. So we should be holding people accountable for that. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but
Yeah.
those are the 3
Well,
things that are on
so
my mind.
I'll tell you something that I've thought about a lot. And this is it sounds a little naive when I tell people that this is the way that I think, but it's always astounded me that there are arguments about oh gosh, I could just can't just hit it straight, Taylor. Um, there are arguments about like whether or not we should do something that is the best thing, right? I don't understand why we're not collectively and why our leaders are not good shot. Why our leaders are not collectively going, okay, this is clear, this clearly works the best. Let's just do that. Okay, now let's
Yeah,
move on to this topic and figure out what works the best. Okay, let's keep doing that. Okay, this doesn't work. Let's
right.
stop doing that, right? That's pretty basic like scientific logic to me.
Well, yeah.
And since I was in school, it's never now obviously there's that was close. Obviously there's an argument where it's like, okay, well, introduce human greed, right? And now we have to deal with evil, etc.
Right.
But that's make no mistake about it, right? That's what we're fighting against is actual evil, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Going to war and killing people over resources is not like a noble thing to do inherently.
No, yeah, agreed. And I would also like to point out while we're at it, like, I think that term limits are a crazy important part of this discussion. And it may seem like, okay, that's kind of out of, left field a little bit, but
No, I don't think so at all.
we have like 70 and 80, and in some cases, like with Feinstein until recently, 90-year-old people, like,
Yeah.
keeping this system in place because it enriches them. They get into office, and they, of course, they don't want to change anything. Like, they get to insider trade, they get to know everything that's going on, they get to have huge net worths, and there's no time limit on that for them. So the current incentive structure of not just American politics, but like a lot of global politics. Good putt. Is let's keep the people in power who are currently in power, and let's keep the fiat system going as long as possible, because
Oh, good
that's
shot.
that's what keeps them rich.
Right.
So
Yeah,
I guess that's
exactly.
another thing that we should be talking about during the election is like, who of these politicians do we want to elect, and like, are they going to stay in office forever? If the answer
Right.
is yes, don't vote for those people. Vote
Yeah.
for
So
people who don't want to be a career politician.
let's take the raft.
Yeah, let's do it.
So the thing that I'd like to contribute to this personally is we hear things. I hear people talk about all the time. They're like, "Yeah, the economy's awful," right? But then what happens is we end up having the same options next year,
Yeah.
right?
And the year
And the
after
year
that.
after that, and the year after that. And it's like, okay, well, like at what point do we go, hey, let's stop doing the thing that we know is stupid? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so and I think that adding time back, like to bring it back to this is a factor of time as well, right? Is it takes time to discover the right thing to do. I'll give you a
Yeah.
good example. Um,
This putt you're about to make.
yeah, it takes time to get this good at something, is what I'm saying.
Good shot.
Because Jesus Christ, what a game. I just dropped like, let's see, 5. I just dropped 5 strokes off of my already 13 under record.
Dang, dude. Holy,
Yeah.
really? You were
Yeah.
on it today, my guy.
Well, last time was your turn. You like destroyed your Arizona Modern
Oh, that's
record.
true on the stream. Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, you hit it too. Nice work, dude.
Let's go.
Hole in ones for the road. So the factor of time that I was about to mention, what a beautiful course, is it takes time to discover what is right and what is wrong, right?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna
I'm
go
not
down
here
to
to
the
your right.
island so we can actually talk to each other.
Okay. Sounds good.
And if it takes time to discover those things, like that's completely expected to be the case, right?
Yeah.
And however, if we stop ourselves in time, we stop moving forward. I'm not advocating for like reckless progress in a random direction. I'm advocating for what is the next step. And I've been experiencing that a lot in my life because of the fact that I'm just, getting older and going, okay, well, it's not necessarily the best thing to do to go out on Wednesday, Friday, Saturday and get completely hammered, right? Which is
Yeah.
what I used to do in my 20s. Like I was like
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
partier. Like I would go to 3-4 dances a week, stay out till 2:30 in the morning, and I still have to wake up and go to work at 6.
Yeah.
Like that's ridiculous. You can't sustain that. And so
Right.
as you age, you discover, hey, it turns out I can't sustain this, right? My knee hurts or my back hurts, right? Like you
Yeah.
start to figure out like, oh, actually taking it a little slower is not necessarily a bad thing. And that's, that brings you back to that conservator type mindset. And as we move forward with politics and what as Bitcoin teaches us, and I don't mean to like idolize Bitcoin, but as we experience what Bitcoin can bring as a technology to the financial landscape, we start to realize that adding time back into that, having your money actually be valuable for a reason other
Yes.
than the fact that
War.
your military is the biggest one on the planet, that's a reasonable step forward
Yes.
for us to move away from the feudal and tribal situations that we've lived out in the past.
Yeah.
The question really comes down to it is the question in my mind that it really comes down to with all of Bitcoin is, do you want to live in a feudal slavery based society or not?
Yeah. Yes.
That's what it is, because that's
Yes.
what we're experiencing in the U.S. We're experiencing a return from the republic that we had built that was such a mighty force for freedom. It has degraded back into a tribal/feudal society
Yep.
where our money is being used to literally enslave us so that
Yes.
we can't own property. I'm counting on my fingers, stream.
Yeah.
We can't own property at a certain point. We don't get to decide where our or how our kids are educated.
Yep.
That's massive, right? All of your kids are going to school learning about critical race theory and equity and diversity and inclusion. All this stuff is being taught in like math class, and it's like, okay,
Right.
well, I need my kid to be able to also do math
Yeah.
so that I can tell them, hey, there's 21 million Bitcoin, and that's why scarcity, right? Like I need
Right.
my kid to
Yeah.
be not stupid. But what do you do when you destroy a society? You go after the old people, which
And
they
the young
did with
people.
which they do with medicine on a regular basis.
Yep.
We over medicate, and now we're talking about euthanasia, right?
Yep.
Uh, should we just kill our old people, right? That's completely insane.
Yeah.
Um, and then we also go after the young people. We indoctrinate, we educate, we deprogram.
Yeah.
We start to use words like that are like, oh, well, it's all about compassion and friendliness. And Bitcoin actually stops all of this, right? Because
Yep.
Bitcoin actually teaches us that we can pull out of that system. We can continue to be free. We can then dollar cost average not only into investments and markets and things, but we build our arc, right? We build a safe haven for ourselves and our families. And if each individual does that, each individual ends up having sovereignty, and a united nation under individual sovereignty is what ends up actually being successful. That's why in the first 200 years of the start of this country, we went from being absolutely nothing to being
To a
the
powerhouse.
greatest superpower on the planet. That's
Yes.
why that happened with the US. It's traceable. There's the history to it. And I won't get into how we did it, but because there were definitely some ethical questions along the way, to be fair.
Yeah.
But so the same thing happens with every society. So I think it's really a poignant point that you're making, that like time is the substrate of what currency and value actually is. Time is the only
Yeah.
thing that is not a renewable resource.
Right. And
Um,
I think a really ginger way to tie this back into the audience listening, if you don't know a ton about Bitcoin, what's the one thing that is most scarce in your life? It's time. What's the one thing that you spend the most of your life doing? If you're an adult, it's work. Do you want the time that you spend every single day to be worth something? Or do you want someone else who doesn't control your own time to be responsible for the value that you produce and crushing it? Now, like Pigeon said a minute ago, we don't want to idolize Bitcoin. But in my opinion, if you talk to anybody out there, like that's not in the top 1%, and you ask them how they're feeling about the economy or about global affairs, almost everyone's depressed. And I want to say, like, if there is a solution that is not Bitcoin that can get us to a place where Bitcoin could in terms of value, I'm all freaking ears, y'all.
yeah,
I'm all ears
100%.
because I don't know of anything else other than Bitcoin that has that type of freedom power where the elite can't just straight up control it. So,
Yeah.
if you have something else that's obvious, like hit us up in the comments and be like, "Yo, you should research this thing," because I absolutely will.
Yeah.
But until then, buy some Bitcoin, do some research. Like the time for change is now. It's right now.
And
And
so this
yeah,
is okay. The only thing stopping Bitcoin right now, you're talking about like how to kind of advance Bitcoin adoption, or well, how to advance adoption of whatever the next big thing is going to be, like whatever the next freedom thing is.
yeah,
Um, I think that accumulating Bitcoin is one of the ways that you can advance that cause, because of the fact that if let's say next year 300 million people in the US decided to just not pay taxes
yeah,
successfully. We all
yeah,
united. We all said, this year, we're just not doing it. Y'all haven't been, we've been paying you and you've been not doing your job. So
yeah,
we're going to stop paying you.
right,
And all of a sudden, and I was kind of laughing about this because we're talking about like the government shutting down and stuff.
yeah,
And it's funny to me because most people, when I talk to them, when we're like, the government's going to shut down. Oh no. Most people I talk to are like, good, good. Like,
yeah.
screw
Let it
them.
shut down.
Like, we'll be fine. Which, it'd be some chaos involved, right? People who work for
Much
the
less
government
than you
would have
think,
to
though.
find a new job. But, I don't really care too much about that. Like,
We have to
contribute
find
value
new
instead of
jobs.
just policing people. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm having to figure out new jobs just to feed myself. So like
yeah,
you can do it too.
yeah,
Um And that's the exact same thing with Bitcoin. If everyone stops using fiat, all of a sudden, fiat is no longer valuable at all, which
Right.
will cause a transitionary phase. We get that. But I mean, it's growing pains, right? Like we have to grow at some point. We can't just keep banging our heads against the same wall, knowing well that our face is bloody. Like,
Yeah, and I would say too, like we mentioned earlier in the stream, this is literally the worst global economy that we've had in our lifetime.
yeah,
So if we're like, "Oh no, we can't switch to Bitcoin because of growing pains," I'm like, "Really? Send them my way, man!" Because right now I don't see any way out of the complete economic disaster that we're in. Like, so I'm down to try anything, which is
yeah,
why I'm such a huge Bitcoin proponent. I'm like, do anything that takes the power out of the elite's hands, that adds time back in, that makes my hourly wage worth something. You know,
yeah. No,
at
totally
the end.
agree. I'm
So
actually looking at the chat right now, and
yeah,
Paul, it looks like, is talking about research IRC 643. Do you know what IRC 643 is?
I'm not sure.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll
Off
have
the
to
top
do
of
that
my head.
research, Paul. We'll check it out. Why don't you hit us up on Twitter on the stream post and hook us up with a link or two? That would be awesome. We would love to look into additional stuff. Oh, Internal Revenue Code. That's what the IRC stands for. Okay, cool. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
we'll look up the Internal Revenue Services nonsense because we want to read about it so we can talk shit about them on stream. Um, okay, cool, man. Well, hey, look, good work. I feel
Yeah, that
like
was a productive conversation. I think that it's something that needs to happen. While we're here, since we're wrapping up, I would just like to point out this will probably be our last episode for a little while, at least with me on
yes.
it, because I'm going to be Papa Perp here in the next couple weeks.
Woot woot.
So yeah, I'm super excited about it. Although I got to admit, having a baby in the midst of all of this crisis is stressful.
Hey,
But no,
look,
I'm
man. People have been having kids
forever.
for as long as there were people, so it'll be
Yeah, I
fine.
know.
You're gonna
It'll
be
work out.
fine. You'll
So
figure
yeah,
it out.
I am super stoked. That being said, like you may or may not do some episodes. Like I don't
I
know,
may or may not
depending
do
on.
some episodes. I'll keep you guys
So
updated.
we'll announce it on
Yeah,
Twitter. Yeah,
100%.
but
But
so
stay
yeah.
tuned.
Cheers for Papa Perp. I'm excited to be a dad. Looking forward to
Woo!
hanging out with y'all more. In the meantime, if you want to hear our sultry voices in a not so professional setting, like we mentioned, we stream on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. I'll probably miss a couple of those when my kid's born, but I can't keep away. So
Oh,
if
totally
you
fair.
are just hooked on Purple and Pigeon, that's where you can find us.
All right.
So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us. This has been Gingerly. Pigeon, thanks for hanging out and playing golf with me, dude. And yeah, go buy
Always.
some
Sorry I
Bitcoin,
kicked your
ladies.
ass.
Peoples. Yeah, yeah, it's okay. Turnabout's fair play.
All right, man. Roll that
Cool.
intro or outro.
Outro.